Hello there, Drew Hanish of Whiskey Lore, and time for another whiskey tasting, and it is Black Tie. Yes, doing a smoky whiskey today. And for those people who are Scotch whiskey fans and you love the smoke, and you've been a little bit frustrated by the fact that prices of Scotch whiskeys are starting to climb up. I mean, I've been used to seeing Lafroig 10 at around $52 a bottle. Now I'm starting to see it dip into the, I guess it wouldn't be dip, it would be climb into the 60s, which is frustrating to watch. When I go to the store now, I'm looking through and I'm like, oh man, I'm so used to paying such and such dollar amount for this, and now all of a sudden it's starting to climb up in price. So with that going on, what I would suggest is this is a great time to take a look at some Irish whiskeys. And I was talking to a guy last night. We had an event here in Greenville where I was doing a presentation of MGP and talking about whiskeys. And one of the guys there was like, thank you for introducing me to Irish whiskey. He went to Dead Rabbit when he was in New York and was like, wow, this is not what I thought Irish whiskey was. His impression of Irish whiskey was Jameson. And it is so different. There are so many different types of Irish whiskeys out there. And one of the distilleries that is making a peated whiskey, in fact, everything they make is going to be peated in some way, shape, or form, is the Sliabh distillery in Ardara. And this is in Donegal. And this one is one that I picked up the other day. I have not tasted this one until recently, obviously. Can't say this is a first time review on this. I have been tasting this one for a day or two. But I have had the Midnight Silkie. In fact, that's when I talked to James Doherty and did my interview with him. That's what we did a tasting of, and then I ended up liking it so much I bought a second bottle of it. Now, this is not distillate that has come from their own distillery. This is distillate that came from Great Northern Distillery, John Teeling's business, and Brian Watts, the distiller there, worked with James to come up with these different blends and different variations. What's interesting about the Midnight Silkie is that that one is not listed as a single malt, but it is a blend of different single malts. This one has some grain neutral spirit in it. So this one is going to be a mixture of a triple distilled single malt, a double distilled single malt, and then also has the grain neutral whiskey in it as well. And so what I'm loving about these whiskeys, kind of going back to where I started with this, is that I paid $47 for that, and I think I paid around the same for Midnight Silkie, and they're available, which is great. In my area, South Carolina, if it's broken through South Carolina, it's probably getting to other places because we're a pretty tough state to get into. And so there's more of a chance that you're going to find this on your shelf. Now, the thing is, if you are a peated Scotch whiskey fan, if you're an Islay fan, this does come from the West Coast. Well, the distillery is on the West Coast. The juice is coming from the East Coast. So the grain is actually coming from Scotland. All right, so you're probably not going to necessarily get the medicinal character that you would think of when you think of Islay, because if they're going to Inverness to get this grain, then it's not going to have the same kind of peat that you might expect out of some of the Islay distilleries. That said, Bruichladdich also gets a lot of their grain malted in Inverness, and so it comes up with a bit more of a woodsy kind of a smoke to it rather than that medicinal character that you get from the iodine in the water off the Atlantic coast. So this will be an interesting thing to watch when this eventually will shift over to being whiskey being made from the distillery itself. And when that happens, what are you going to end up with? Is it going to pick up a little bit more of a medicinal character? Well, again, I went into this completely blind, not really knowing what to expect off of this particular whiskey. And when I put this, and again, this is the dark Silkie, not the midnight Silkie. I wasn't quite sure what to expect out of this. And on the nose, it is a fascinating whiskey because there is a level of earthiness in this that reminds me of a Lefroy, but it's not a seaweedy kind of a vegetal note. It's more of a grassy kind of a note. There's a nice hint of smoke in there as well. I would not call it an aggressive ashy smoke like an Ardbeg. It's not that aggressive. Again, it's more of a campfire kind of a smell that you're getting. Not overly ashy, but just kind of like the fire's died down and it's just smoldering now, and you're kind of getting some of the wood notes out of that smoke. Sometimes I call it a sawdust kind of a note too. It's like you walk into a sawmill and you smell that. It's like you can almost smell the heat of that sawdust. The other things coming out in this are apple and pear, but they're very light underneath in terms of what I can nose out of this. And a little caramel coming from the bourbon casks. I could not find anything about any kind of special casks that they're using for this. The Midnight Silkie does have a variety of casks that it uses, but this one, I believe this is just done in bourbon casks as far as I know. So, do a little tasting on this. It's got a great mouthfeel to it, and it is caramel, apple, and pear. And you go, where is the smoke? That's what's really interesting about this. The smoke isn't necessarily there on the palate when it first comes to you, but then towards the finish, you get a hint of smoke, but it's not really that aggressive in terms of the smoke on this. I get a lot of pear all the way through to the finish on this particular whiskey. A little ginger note towards the end that just kind of lays on the palate. The caramel is there throughout, but there's a lot of fruitiness that pulls in this particular whiskey. I get some red delicious apple towards the end there that's just kind of hanging on the palate. It is interesting because it is definitely something when you smell it, you go earthy smoke, and then when you drink it, you're getting more pear, apple, caramel, and there's a nice sweetness there to it. And so I think if you are a big peat loving fan, you're probably going to want to first try the Midnight Silkie before trying this. If you are a fan of Highland peated whiskeys, I would suggest trying this one first, because this one is going to give you more of those kind of Speyside characteristics you might be used to, more of that orchard fruit kind of a note. And you get to nose that smoke, but then as you're tasting it, it's really just a hint of smoke for the rest of the journey. So, very interesting whiskey. I don't know why at the end I got a corn note out of it, like Fritos. I don't know where that came from, but there was like a little hint of Fritos at the end of this as well. Maybe something left over from the bourbon barrel. I'm not sure, but it was a really interesting note to all of a sudden experience. And now I'm craving a bag of Fritos. So, what do you know? I know what I could pair this with now, at least anyway. Anyway, that's it for my review on this. I hope you enjoyed it. Have you tried any of the Silkie products? What are you thinking of Irish whiskey? Is it a good area to start kind of moving into now that Scotch whiskeys have become a little bit more pricey? And these are still great values. Great values. Irish whiskey, I don't know if it's tariff issues or what it may be, but for some reason, the stuff we have coming in from Ireland right now is coming in at great price points and definitely worth a look-see. Thanks for watching. Give me a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you'd like to watch more of these. And until next time, cheers and Sliabh. Such a great mouthfeel on this whiskey. A little more of that smoke now coming, actually. I've talked about it enough. A bigger taste of it will bring a little cocoa along with that smoke. And it feels so nice on the palate. It really, really does. It's not a heavy whiskey like a Glenglassaugh, but it is actually very nice body to that whiskey.